All right, we'll get this going for now. As more people come in, I want to welcome everyone and thank you everyone for joining tonight. My name is Denise Arquetto, and I am the athletics communication manager at Stonehill. Ahead of welcoming our guests tonight and beginning our program, I want to just quickly address that, as many of you know, we had a Zoom bomb at another event last week, and that's something that we don't want to see repeated this evening or in future events. For tonight, we obviously, rather than sharing an open link to the event, we only shared the link. We had a registration link and we opened it to people who pre-registered. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And we're very excited about this presentation. With that being said, please hold on to any and all questions while the presentation is going on. We will have time at the end to answer all questions. We'll have two different ways that you can ask questions. We'll have the hand raising icon and we'll unmute you if you want to speak the question, or you can feel free to type it in the chat once we open the chat following the presentation. Thank you all in advance for what I'm sure will be thoughtful questions and a very respectful discussion. Today, this is presented by the Stonehill Athletics Task Force for addressing racial injustice. We have a few members of the task force on today with us. We have Kayla Raymond, junior on the women's basketball team. Sophie Glidden, also a junior on the women's basketball team. Shamir Johnson, a junior on the men's basketball team, and Stephen Cobbs, sophomore on the football team. So now I will turn it over to Sophie, who will kick us off.
All right, so hello everyone. I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. I would also like to give a special thanks to Brandon Cox for being a part of the very first event that we have hosted by our athletics task force against racial injustice. In response to the current social climate of our country, us student athletes, administration, and coaches all felt that this campus really needed an organized group to spread awareness and promote change. Our primary goal is to address and acknowledge issues of social injustice and use our platform as athletes to make this campus more aware of the problems at large. Our first initiative this semester was to increase the awareness about voting and provide people information about just how important it can be. Since we began, we have had 12 teams reach 100% voter registration on campus. However, we don't want to stop here. There are so many ways that we can impact this community and create a safer and more inclusive environment for all of us. Our job on this task force is to do all that we can to make sure that the school is held accountable and will continue to push for the change that is needed. We have the hopes that our impact will continue to grow in the years to come so that Stonehill can become a place that doesn't only state that we welcome diversity and inclusion, but actively practices these ideas and follows through with those promises. So now we're going to have Stephen Cobbs is going to introduce our speaker for the night.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Today, we have the pleasure of having Brandon Cox, a Stonehill football alumni, class of 2012, elementary ed/American Studies double major, coming to speak to us on the matter of the killing of his close friend, DJ Henry. Brandon was with DJ the night of his death, and today he will be telling his side of the events that took place that night. Today, you will find Brandon being the Wellesley Public School Metco Elementary Academic Coordinator, a program that provides students with a strong academic foundation rich in cultural, educational, ethnic, socioeconomic, and racial diversity, fostering the opportunity for children from Boston and from neighboring suburbs to develop a deeper understanding of each other in an integrated public school setting. With that being said, thank you everyone again for coming. It's very well appreciated. And here is Brandon to kick us off and tell his story.
All right, everyone, just want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your evening to join me today and kind of hear my story, kind of engage in conversations surrounding social justice that is very prevalent in our country and in the world today. So I'll start off by just kind of telling my story, what I went through and how it impacted me, and then towards the end we'll have a chance for questions and then just see where that leads us. So in 2010. I was a Stonehill student, like many of you, just trying to find my way through college, get my grades to where they needed to be, enjoying playing football, enjoying being a student overall. Something, a lifelong dream of mine was to be able to play football on the next level, but then also to get a good education and take that with me throughout life. Seeing as I was an elementary education major, I wanted to go ahead and give back to the community through educating children. So I was just a regular, college student, and one of my close friends, who I grew up with, DJ, was also had the dream of playing college football as well. We also had that dream of moving on to the next level, but that is also very hard. So it just so happened that we went to two schools that played in the same conference. So twice a year we would play each other. Earlier that season, he had already come down here to play us here at Stonehill, and it was our turn to go up to Pace and make that trip and battle it out. And it was decided that week that I would go ahead and stay behind after the game and get a chance to hang out with my friend who I grew up with, who I played on the same team with for so long, who I had so many life experiences with. We decided that, okay, it would be a great chance for me to stay behind. My parents came up to the game and everything, so I'd have a ride back to school the next day, and just kind of enjoy being friends. Being at a school together and just kind of enjoy the fruits of our labor. So that night that day it was the Pace homecoming game, and I'm happy to say that Stonehill came out on top that day. But even so, after the game, even though we were competing on the field against each other after the game, it was like we hadn't missed a beat. It was as if we were playing on the same team, because it didn't matter to us in life. We were always on the same team, even though we were competing. We always wanted each other to strive to win. So it was a normal night, just like I'm sure many of you have had at college. He was introducing me to his friends, some people I've met before, people I hadn't, and it was homecoming. So even though they lost, people were still out and celebrating and having a good time. And we decided to go to one of the local watering holes there, up near his school, and we were having a good evening, having a good time, interacting with people. He was getting to show me just how kind of things run there, and it was a good night. And they decided that it was time to go. That we had heard about some fight or something that had happened outside of the bar that had nothing to do with either one of us. And the owners of the establishment said, "Hey, it's time to go. Turn on the lights." And DJ and I proceeded to the vehicle. We go to get his car. We had traveled there with a couple of friends, and we weren't going to leave them behind. So he goes ahead and pulls up his car to the front of the bar, kind of parked in the fire lane, not in the way of anybody, not doing anything. Just kind of, we're sitting there waiting. After a while, he went to go try to find some of our friends that we couldn't find, but he got back in the car. And at that time, a police officer came up to the car and motioned for us to move along, get out of the fire lane. We were, blocking the fire lane. We can understand, but it was simple. He asked us to move, and we go ahead to go move. And within a matter of seconds, we're pulling off slowly, and in a matter of seconds, all of a sudden, I see a dark figure run into the road with what I can see is a gun in his hand raised. Now I couldn't at that time I could not tell that he was a police officer. It was dark. He was wearing dark clothes. He wasn't wearing what I would call a typical uniform. You couldn't really tell that he was a police officer. And without warning, without cause, began firing into the vehicle. And then after the shot, I ducked down, and I hear more shots going off. And I take a second to look up as I'm ducking down in the car. I take a second to look up, and I can see this man on the hood of the car firing into the vehicle. And then everything come to a sudden stop. And then the next thing that I hear my friend say the friend that I grew up with, the friend that I played sports with, the friend that have been through so many life experiences. And these are the last words I heard him say is, "They shot me, they shot me. I can't believe they shot me." And just in total disbelief and shock. And what transpired after that, in my eyes, was then the worst part of that. Not to mention that, we had just been fired upon. My friend is telling me he's been shot. I can feel that I've been hit in my arm as well. Amongst all the confusion, a bunch of police rush up to the car, yelling, "Get out, get out, get out, get on the ground." I get out, I get on the ground, and I can see that there's no police around me. Nobody's checking to see who else was in the car. They're all on the other side of the car. And at that time, what I didn't realize is I wasn't sure. There was another friend who was in the back of the car. He was in the back seat. He was right behind DJ, and fortunately he was not struck with any bullets, but he had bullet holes on either side of him. And they saw him and DJ, and they ripped both of them out of the car. And at that point, our friend who was in the back sustained some injuries from them ripping him out of the car, slamming his head against the ground, causing him to have a concussion. DJ was taken out of the car, slammed to the ground, handcuffed. I, on the other hand, had nobody around me. It was just utter confusion and mayhem going on. So I get up and I walk a few steps. I can feel that there's something wrong with my arm. I take my coat off. I can see the wound. I can see the flesh has been ripped from my arm. So I walk back towards the car, and a police officer comes up to me. And at this point, his gun is in his hand, but by his side. And he says, "Are you hurt?" And I said, "Yes, I've been hitting my arm." And he said, "Well, where were you?" And I said, "I was in the car." And at that point, he raised his gun at me, yelled at me to get on the ground, handcuffed me, and proceeded to yank me up. And at this point, he walks me to a police car that was parked behind where DJ's car was. And at that point, I see DJ on the ground, handcuffed behind his back, gasping for air. And just in complete and utter shock. It's a very surreal moment to see your friend there that has been shot, who you heard exclaiming that he's been shot, to be on the ground with no medical attention, nobody around him, just on the ground struggling for life. And then you're thrown into the back of a car. And just the treatment of him and the lack of care for his life in that moment strikes me to this day. Something that you live with every day, something that you can't unsee, something that you never get over. And he's being treated this way by the very people who are tasked with protecting us. That's something that is very hard to grasp, especially in that moment. So I'm sitting there in the back of a police car, can barely see what's going on with my friend. And the time that it takes for them to administer help to him, it was inhumane. At that point, he was not treated as though he was a human being. And that is the part that hurts the most for me. So for the sake of this story and for the sake of what's going on here tonight, I'll fast forward a little bit, because the mistreatment stopped. It continued through to the hospital as I'm in the ambulance, handcuffed to a stretcher. But I fast forward a little bit to when I finally am able to go ahead and say goodbye to my friend and see, the marks on his face that weren't there before. And having to leave that hospital knowing that, I just saw my friend for the last time. To return home and see, news vans lined up and down my street. So at that point, I took solace in the fact that I was going to, I was in college at the time, I was at Stonehill, and I could go back on campus and those news vans could not follow me there. So I took refuge in my room, and for a while did not leave that room. And I could really see how things can spiral. Within the first few days, the news reports that were coming out about my story, the false narrative of, a drunk college kid trying to run down the police, and the police officer was in fear for his life and others' lives, and they were told to stop and they did it, when none of those were true, which to this day has been documented in court that is not true. But once those things are out there, it's really hard to take them back. It's really hard for people to see you any way other than what you've been portrayed as in the news. So I can distinctly remember the first time I left the room, and it was to go to get something to eat. I've been in my room for a few days, and luckily I had some good friends who, brought things by to see me and stop by quickly. But I just hadn't had the strength to leave the room. I finally leave my room to go to the cafeteria and get something to eat. And the looks from my fellow classmates, some people that I knew, others who I didn't know very well, but knew who I was because of what had happened. To see the looks that people gave me, and, the fear I could see in their eyes, or just the doubt that they had in me at that moment. It's something that it's hard to describe. And it's something that I see now in the news all the time. Whatever that first story is, whatever that first narrative is, it follows you. It follows you for a very long time. And that narrative followed me around Stonehill for, the rest of my time there. Not for everybody, not for the people who truly knew me, but there were always those people who, I might have seen around campus who, knew who I was, on the football team, who, made up their minds about who I was and what happened that night. And now that is something that is still happening today with all these stories that we see in the news. We get one side of the story, we get one narrative, and that's the narrative that is run with. And it is so disheartening to see. Because with my own story, I've had classmates, especially this year with everything that's gone on in the news, I've had quite a few classmates who have actually contacted me, apologizing, saying that they now see how wrong they were in that moment, and have now seen how things can be portrayed one way when they're really another way. And it's crazy that it's taken some people 10 years to kind of see that and come to terms with that. But I feel like the way that we can combat that is to share these stories and have everybody really search for the truth, because there's always three sides to every story. And the side we need to be looking for is that third side, the truth. So I say all this to say, we have to go ahead and not just take what's going on, just take for what it's worth right now and then forget about it. Because time and time again, I've shared my story, and it sticks for a while and people remember for a while, then it fades. People start to think about other things. They move on, they move forward, and then it's, kind of out of sight, out of mind. But for me and my friends who were there that night, those who were in the car, those who were there who tried to rush to DJ's help and were blocked from helping him, were yelled at, tased, for just trying to administer, life-saving CPR. It sticks with us every single day. And so that's the message that we need to send to people when we're talking about these things. These things don't go away just when you stop seeing it on your Instagram, just when you stop seeing it in your news. These things happen every day. And this is something DJ's family has to live with every single day. And so that's why when in my work as an educator, I try to do what I can to help the future, help the children coming up now realize the changes that need to be made and realize their power. The power is right here in the Zoom chat with you college students. You are the ones who are going to be going in that workforce next, who make the rules. And it's up to you guys to really keep this on the forefront and go for change. And I actually just heard about the sit-in that some of you guys did last week. And that is something that I couldn't imagine happening while I was at Stonehill. And I just think that is very, very powerful that you guys are seeing what's wrong at your school and a place that you love. There's nothing wrong with seeing what the inadequacies at Stonehill. It's okay. It's just how you show you that you really love that school and you want it to be better. So I got muted there for a second. So we want to go ahead and be the change that we want to see in your school and also throughout the country. So take a moment to kind of speak on what has been done to further this cause. And I'll first start with the Dream Fund, which is a fund that has been made friend's name. And the goal of this fund is to give children who don't have the means to get involved in sports or after different school activities. It's a charity that helps kids actualize their potential. And something that was near and dear to me and DJ's heart is sports, something that we always loved since we were very, very young. And so that's what the DJ Dream Fund, amongst many, many other things, looks to do, is to give children the chance to participate in these things that they otherwise might not have. And I also try to do that work through my job. I've been an educator since I graduated, since 2012. I try to give back because I believe that education is the key. We need to be educated on these matters, and we need to teach for what is going on in the world. So I try to do that through my work every day in school, and I also try to do that through a summer program that I run. I run a camp, a non-for-profit camp, where we take inner city kids to our campsite and we give them experiences they might not otherwise have in the city, things that aren't always accessible to them in the city. And so those are just some of the things that I try to do to give back to my community and also make sure that DJ's story is not lost and that people realize that we still have a lot of work to do. But it's that I truly believe in and truly believe we need to keep fighting for. And so at this time, I would love to hear questions from people. If they have any more questions for me about, my story and what I've been through, if they have any questions about, what's going on in the world now and how I feel about it, I want to open up the floor to people now.
Yeah, so like I said in the beginning, either ask questions or whatever you would like to say, either hand raise through the hand raise button, or we will now open the chat. so that you can ask questions that way.
Mhm. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and I can hear you. How you doing?
All right, Wayne Dozier calling. Wonderful time, wonderful talk, sir. I'm so glad to see you out here doing such a wonderful thing for the DJ Henry Dream Fund and also for yourself, because it must be a healing process in sharing this information to take some of the burden off your mind and heart. So very much appreciated. Very much appreciated, bro. My question is, where is your camp and when does it open up?
So my camp is in Hull, Massachusetts. We usually start, it depends on when school ends, but we usually start at the beginning of July and run through August. Obviously, this last summer with COVID and all that, it was really hard to run any programs, but we're eyeing 2021 and hoping that we can get kids in there and give them back some of the great experiences that we've been able to over the years.
Is there a name other than Brandon that we could find it in? How do we find it?
Yep, it's called Sunset Point Camp.
Sunset Point Camp.
Sunset Point Camp. We are technically owned charities, but we're a subset of Catholic charities. So you can find us. So if you type in Sunset Point Camp, Hull, Mass, you'll be able to get right to us.
Okay. I'm gonna spread the information along.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so a couple other hands raised.
Hi, it's Deepa.
Deepa, how you?
How are you?
Well.
I just wanted to join to support you. It's been a long 10-year journey that we've all been through. I am so extremely proud of you, of your strength, your courage, and your voice, that you continue to share your story and inspire, empower, and motivate people. And to the Stonehill students, I am a board member of the DJ Henry Dream Fund, djdreamfund.org. If there's any way that you guys can help on social media, the handle is DJ Dream Fund, and just repost, all the different things that are going on, become a follower. As Brandon had mentioned, we are trying to do good work with helping young people. We've helped over 7,000 young kids so far, and we continue to find creative ways to help support. But I just really wanted to join. I made a commitment to myself the night that this happened, that I'll always be there to support you and everyone involved. And so I'm holding up my promise, and I'm here for you, whatever you need. And for all of you students out there, your voice does matter, even though it may seem that in this day and time that we're living in, things are really challenging. Please just know that, your voice matters and your vote counts, and things will get better as long as we stay aligned and make a commitment for change. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepa. I really appreciate you. And Martina, how you doing?
Wait a minute, let me turn this back up.
There you go.
I'm so happy to see you.
I'm so happy to see you too. How have you been?
Good. Not everybody forgot you. Not everybody forgot your story.
I appreciate it.
I don't know if your ears were burning last Wednesday during our sit-in, but I had the opportunity to talk, and well, you know me, I don't have any trouble talking. And when I got up there, I told yours and DJ's story, and not knowing that you were coming Monday night, that you'd be here tonight. And the thing that I said to the students, and I'll say again, is that it's here. It's right on our campus. It can happen at any time, and it really demonstrated to me personally the precarious nature of young Black men's lives in our country. And I'm grateful that you're still, committed to educating people and sharing your story. And you know me, not only can I talk, but I can cry. So I'm going to stop now so I won't cry. But I'm very, very happy to see you, Brandon. So happy.
Thank you so much. From day one, you were one of the professors who was always supportive of me, and didn't judge me, didn't jump to conclusions about me. So I really appreciate you wholeheartedly. Whew, you guys getting to me. So I have Peggy here. You want to go ahead and speak? I see your hand raised. Not. All right. I'll go. I see Des. Des, how you doing, man?
What's up? How we doing?
I'm all right.
First, I just want to say that I think you did a good job of explaining that night. That was a crazy night, and I think the viewers got a good sense of what it was that night. My question for you is, how do you initiate and conduct those combos with the young kids that you're around? Those tough combos that some are not aware of. They might have heard of it, but don't understand. How do you go about with those conversations?
So those are always can be tough, but I always go into it. You have to go into it fully honest. You can't try to sugarcoat it. And I know it's hard with young kids. And there's a way that you can go into those conversations without sugarcoating it, but making it age appropriate. So it all depends on who the child is, how old they are, what grade level they're in, where they're at in their life. But I enter into it with full honesty and let them know, we live in an imperfect world. We are imperfect people, and that's okay. But when we see an injustice, we have to try to right it. And depending on who the kid is and their age, I can go into detail about my full story. I can tell them exactly what happened to me. But then I also tell them the other side of it, how instead of letting instead of doing instead of letting that hate fester or letting my story kind of take over my life, I tell them about how we can go another way with it, how we can go the positive way, how we can try to take what has happened to what I try to do is take what happened to me and make something good come out of it. Hence why I take all the time in the world I can to working with children. That's what I do in my regular career. That's what I do with one of the biggest perks of being a teacher is having the summers off. And instead of taking those summers off, I try to dedicate that time to being with children who are less fortunate than me, because I was very fortunate growing up. I had everything I needed. I had everything I wanted. And yet I still count police brutality. So I try to give back to those children and try to help them navigate this world and find their way and help them see how they can make the change and be the change in the world that we need. So the number one priority is not to try to lie or show anything. We have to be able to tell the youth in an appropriate way, but we have to be able to tell them what is happening and what is going on. And for those of you who don't know, Des here is one of my really good friends. He was also in the vehicle with me and DJ that night. So I thank you for hopping on here tonight, man. And I thank you for your perspective. And I thank you for that great question, because the answer really, we can do all that we can do, but the answer really will lie with when we can get the youth and the next generation to carry the torch that we're carrying right now. We're going to have to pass it off to them at one point. And the only way we can do that is if they know what they're battling. And if we continue to cover it, we continue to sugarcoat it, they're not going to know what they're in for. And that's not fair to them. And that's not going to enact any change. So that's how I kind of handle those situations.
Great, man. Thank you.
Brandon, I have a question for you from one of your viewers in the chat. It says, I know there is no right answer to this question, but what are your thoughts on what is helpful and what isn't helpful when it comes to solving the racial issues that our country faces today?
I mean, that's a loaded question right there. And I feel like it kind of goes back to the question I just answered from my buddy Des, is we can't sugarcoat it. We can't cover it up. We have to be honest. And I feel so like I'll tell you a story about when I was in high school. I was in my high school history class. And every chapter that we had, it's about 50 pages long, telling you the beginning, middle, and end of everything that has happened in our American history. You get to slavery, and it's a 3-page chapter. And I understand slavery is one of the darkest times in our American history. But if we don't teach it, if we don't talk about it, if we don't explore it, if we don't explore what led to it, we are going to end right back in that same place. Maybe not to, it won't look the way it looked, but it will still be here. And the people who are saying it is still here, our prison system and the way that prisons work, you just transition from one form of slavery to another. So if we try to cover those things up, talk about these things, and we don't face these things head on, then we're never going to solve anything. I think that is first and foremost the biggest issue with social injustice, is people don't want to talk about it. And, I'm not going to put anybody down for what side they on when it comes to kneeling or not kneeling for the flag. I can see some people's sides of both sides of it, but I always come back to is we're too busy arguing of whether it's respectful or disrespectful, and not talking about what the issue was. Why aren't we? And then we're not talking about the social injustices that go on every single day. We find something to deflect from that and talk about something different. So the moment we can face these things head on, actually talk about these things, that'll be when real change will come. But until then, if we keep sweeping it under the rug, if we keep ignoring it, we're going to end up right here every single time. So that's that's a loaded question right there, but I think that's where it starts, is talking about it, educating about it. Like I said, I mentioned some people who 10 years later, apologizing. What they're really apologizing for is being ignorant to issues that a Black man might face, or a Black woman might face, or other people of color might face, because it's not something that they've ever had to deal with in their life, because it doesn't affect them the same way it affects me. I can't go anywhere and have people not know that I'm Black. It's just the facts of life. And people, it's hard to understand that. It's hard to understand what that feels like when you've never had to deal with it. So that's, this the ignorance of not knowing, the blissful ignorance sometimes. And a lot of times it's not people's fault. They didn't. It's not their fault that they weren't born, that they weren't born Black, that they don't have to realize these things. But once you're made aware of these things and know these things to be true, it's about what you do at that point. So that's my long-winded answer to a question that we could discuss for days on end, if not longer.
Brandon, I have another question for you in the chat. It says, could you address efforts to have this case further reviewed since various settlements, and then what can we do to help it get reviewed?
So at this point, what we've really been pushing for is there was a petition out there to have this case reopened and looked at from a criminal aspect, because Officer Hess, the one who killed DJ and injured me and caused Des real harm, has never been tried criminally. And in court, it has been proven that he was the aggressor. So there's been a real push through, you know, I asked you to sign the petition. I asked you to go to the DJ Dream Fund and donate if you can. I asked you to repost anything that the DJ Henry Dream Fund puts out there. I encourage you to look further into our story, but signing that petition could really, really help us out. And excuse me, and within the last few months, we've actually had a couple different celebrities who have posted about DJ, who have shared his story. So I ask you now to go ahead and continue to share his story, because without pressure, we're not going to be able to get that case back into the court. So what we need is a full court press right now of pressure saying, we're still here, we still remember this case, we still want justice in this case. So I just ask you all to continue to use your voices, and that will really, really help us out.
Another question for you, Brandon, is you touched upon the falsehoods that the police projected and quickly put out into the public to try and clear their own names. Did they finally tell the truth about what happened that night?
Yes, to an extent. An apology was issued to DJ's family. It has been proven in court that the things that were originally said were not true. There was an officer that testified that wanted to testify in the original court case, in the original deposition. He wanted to testify that they would not let testify. The reason they wouldn't let him testify is because he told us that he was firing at Officer Hess, because there were what a lot of people don't know is that two different officers discharged their weapon that night. The officer that they wouldn't let speak was firing at Officer Hess because he saw him as the aggressor. He didn't realize he was a cop. He didn't know what he was doing, but he saw him and fired at him to try to get him because he perceived him as the threat. That is one of the to me, that was one of the biggest things that they left out. Because if you go into a deposition and you're trying to get an indictment and you hear from another police officer that you perceived that police officer as a threat, and that's not just coming from me, that's not just coming from Des, it's not just coming from the other people who were there that night, it's coming from an officer saying that the officer who fired into that vehicle was wrong, that could have changed the whole course of our case. But it was left out and didn't fully come out until civil suits, which don't hold the same weight as a criminal trial. So you can be found guilty in a civil case. Money can be allotted, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to jail, because a civil case is just a civil case. Unfortunately, it's only about the money. And for us, getting that out there was getting that out there was more important than any monetary value, because now it's on a court document that this Officer Buckley, fired at Officer Hess because he saw him as a threat. And now we can take that and hopefully present that, and that can go ahead and pushing us forward. So that was just one of the false narratives. The narrative that he was, that DJ was trying to run people over has been refuted. They walked it all back. They apologized. But the real apology I want to see is, Officer Hess being tried and convicted. Trying to look quickly through the chat here, through the see if any more hand raised or.
Hey, I'll raise my hand.
How you doing, man?
How's it going, Brandon? Appreciate you for sharing your story, and also being there, and appreciate your friendship for over the past 10 years. have a question. Given the current social state and political state that's happening, sorry, my dog's coughing up right now. Given the state that the current culture and society is in right now, how are you able to stay positive, with all things considered in your own experience?
Yeah, and as I'm sure you know, it's not easy to stay positive in these times when we see videos of Black men being choked or shot. It's not always easy, and the first thing, though, the number one thing that I go to is, how would DJ want me to react? How would he want me to move forward? He wouldn't want me to just curl up in a ball and give up. He wouldn't want me to just say forget it all and just go about my business and not worry about those other things. He would want me to go about my life, live my life to my full potential. And I know that nothing will change if I just try to ignore it, or I just try to, say that's somebody else's problem. I stay positive because I've seen kids who I've talked to, and I tell my story, Black, white, Latino, doesn't matter. When I talk to a child, and they can see just how wrong this was, it gives me hope for the future. And that's where I pull most of my hope from, just from the youth, and you seeing the next generation coming up. They have so much knowledge and information at their fingertips, and unfortunately, some of that is trying to be used negatively. But I see a group of kids coming up now who are very, very savvy and are able to decipher through what's true and what's false. And that's just where I put all my hope, and it kind of keeps me motivated to keep doing what I'm doing. Because if I can change even just a few kids' path and open their eyes to a few things, that can come back tenfold. So that's kind of just how I stay positive and keep going, even though we still see these things happening time and time again. So that's kind of just where I derive some of my power from.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for sharing first and foremost. I appreciate it. I have a quick question. You talked about not being supported when you were at your college, right? What advice would you give people who may sometimes hear those false narratives about these individuals who are getting shot and killed at alarming rates? What advice would you give those individuals to support people like yourself who experienced that traumatic experience?
I mean, first and foremost, you gotta do your research. You gotta see where these false narratives are coming from, and you can't jump to conclusions right away. And I know it's hard, and sometimes all you have is that news story or that article that you found. But if people had really done their research and especially looked into our case, they would have seen all the inaccuracies, from the beginning. And then for those who were on campus with me at that time, I know it might have been hard to try to approach me or talk to me. But if you have that opportunity to talk to somebody who's been through something like this, I sincerely hope that you take the time, try to have that conversation with them. And, that's why anytime anyone wants to talk to me about it and kind of hear my story, hear my point of view, I like to take that, kind of share that with them, because, the only way that we can get through and it's really real is if we have these conversations and we're open to talking about it. So I want to encourage people to actually go forth and do some research, not just take what that first news story says at face value and just run with it. You really got to do your research and really see what comes out, because that first news story that comes out that first day, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes that news story has all the facts. A lot of the times it does not. So you got to hold on and reserve judgment to you really seeing all the documents, you've seen all the facts, you've really heard all sides of that story, because it's real quick, especially when it's a officer involved shooting or anything of that matter. There's always going to be a story right out there right away, and 9 times out of 10 it's gonna benefit on the police. Not all the time, and I'm not saying that the police are always at fault, but you got to look through everything. You got to look at everything through a critical eye, and not just take what you're given right away at face value. Because unfortunately, too many times in this current environment, we're seeing things that are just presented one way when they're really not that way. So we got to be very cognizant of that.
Another question for you. The officer that fired the shots into the car, the year after he was awarded Police Officer of the Year in his district. What do you have to say about that?
That was something that, from the moment I heard that, I was shocked. The audacity to give a man, and at the end of the day, this man took somebody's life, and to award him an award for that essentially, I know they'll say that, oh, that's not what that was for, but you're essentially awarding a police officer for taking somebody's life, somebody who was unarmed, somebody who posed no real threat to you, somebody that you went out of your way to interact with. If Officer Hess had followed proper protocol, he would have never ran in front of a moving vehicle. That is not something that you are taught to do. So to award him with that just shows the blatant disrespect and the the audacity that it took to do that. The just the disrespect for somebody's life was very foreign to me, and it just showed me that they felt they could get away with doing whatever they felt like, that they didn't think that there would be any repercussion coming, and that they were confident that that they were in the right and we were in the wrong. When it at no point was that the case. So it shows me there's a real issue when you just blindly follow somebody in a group, and that goes with any group. When you just blindly follow, and no matter what they did or what they're accused of doing, you say, oh no, you're part of our group, so you must have did the right thing. Just goes to show how broken this system can be at times, and that we have to do better. And just how insensitive that was to not just to DJ, but to his family, and to my family, is showed a lot of true colors.
Another question, Brandon. First off, thank you for sharing. You're a remarkable and brave man. And how is DJ's family doing, and how do you keep in touch with them?
Their strength through all of this is unmatched. To lose your eldest son to such a senseless act, and still to be able to do such positive things with that amazes me every single day. I can say they're doing as well as a family can do when their son has been taken from them. And you can imagine that is probably the hardest thing any parent could ever go through. I don't know one good parent in this world that that would wish that on anybody. That was probably one of the worst things that could happen to a parent. The worst thing that could happen to a parent is to have one of your children taken away from you. But their strength through all of this, the fact that they created this foundation and are helping others in DJ's name just shows how strong they are, and just the, you know, the strength that that family has is unparalleled. So I have to say, you know, they're doing as well as possible, and everything they do now is in his name, and bringing awareness to him and what happened to him, and fighting for justice for him, but also making sure that, you know, the next generation is put in a position to be successful and make those real changes that we so need in this world.
Brandon,
Yes.
it's Peggy.
How's it going, Peggy?
It's going. I just wanted to say that we really appreciate this and the coverage and what you're doing for DJ and as his nana, and it just hurts. It's like yesterday it happened, but we are proud, and we're a proud family, and we wear his name proudly, and we're so grateful for you to do this for us and put his name out there in the right light.
I mean, absolutely. Not a day go by that I don't think of him. Not a day that goes by that I don't want to speak out for him. So you don't have to thank me for that. This is my pleasure. This is just a part of my work now. This is a part of what this is a part of me, and it will be for till the end of time. So no need to thank me for that.
Well, we're going to thank you anyway. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Brandon. I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight and sharing your story. You're definitely a strong individual for actually speaking out on it, and going through that trauma. I just have a question of, you'll always be a part. He'll always be a part of you. But what are you gonna do in the future, just to be like an activist out in the community? If you've even thought about that.
So I think it starts, you know, first and foremost with things like tonight, being able to speak up and share my story, and get the facts of our case out there. But like I kind of like what I said before, in order to enact real change, I think education for me, from my view, is the key. So being able to continue to teach the next generation, you know, the things of the past, what has happened, and where we are right now, I think is one of the biggest ways that I can contribute and keep this going, and making sure that things like this don't continue to happen. You know, like I said before, if we keep sugarcoating it, that's from whether you're a newborn or you're 99 years old. This is not something that I'm gonna sugarcoat for you. And the best way that we can do that is to speak out, in each one of us is to speak out in our own communities. I 100% speak out in my community. You know, I have children who have asked me about my story, and I will share my story, and I'll continue to share my story. But the biggest way we can enact change is to speak up. Just like you guys did I never thought I would see at Stonehill. That was something that I can't imagine happening while I was at Stonehill. So things like that, speaking up, using your voice, using what you have, the tools that you have, is how you enact change. So for you guys at Stonehill, doing that sit-in and speaking up and raising your voices and demanding some things from the people in power at Stonehill, that is how you enact that change. And that is the same things that, you know, that I have to do on my end. Those are the same things that we all have to do on all of our ends in each and every one of our communities. Because if we don't speak up, if we don't use our power, then the status quo is going to remain the way it is.
Professor Bettina, I know I saw your hand raised a little bit earlier, if you want to jump in again.
I just wanted to ask how Brandon's mom is.
My mom's here on the call.
I know.
if you want to say, Donna, how you're doing, you can go ahead. You're on mute still.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm doing well. I'm glad Brandon has the opportunity to do this because this is really helping him. This has really taken a toll on him. It's really been something that has hurt him to his core, as he said. And for him to be able to speak out, once all the cases were closed and everything, he didn't have to work and he didn't have to go to the courthouse anymore. We didn't have to travel up to New York anymore. We didn't have to do vigils and do all this stuff. When everything was over, it was kind of like a letdown because now he's not fighting for him. But through this work, it's really helping him now. And I wanted to sit in because I wanted to see how well I knew he's a great speaker, so I knew he'd do well. But yeah, he's doing a good job. I'm very proud of him.
We're happy to see you here too, Ms. Parks.
Very proud of him. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a great. So in the chat here, I was asked if I can go ahead and I can share my email, and I'll put my email out there towards the end. Or Denise, I know you have my email. If you don't mind just throwing it in the chat for me. So if people want to reach out to me, if they have, once we're done here tonight, if they have any other questions or want to know any way that they can help, you can feel free to reach out to me. I see, one of my former coaches here, Coach Gardner, has his hand raised. So why don't you go ahead and speak, my friend.
Thanks, Brandon. First off, obviously, just thank you so much for, being brave enough to share your story. And I know the Stonehill community, the Easton community, and definitely, DJ's family appreciate the work that you've done, in the 10 years since his death. And I don't have so much a question, but as you and I were having some conversations building up to this event tonight, it kind of dawned on me that I actually have in my possession, it's actually going to be a gift to you from Stonehill and from our football team and athletic department. So this is the actual game ball from that day, from that game, the day, prior to DJ's murder. And it was given to me because that was my first game as calling the defense here at Stonehill. But I think it's only right that it goes to your possession and to DJ's family. And if I remember correctly, he had a pass breakup in that game, and I'm pretty sure there's a good chance this was the ball that he touched that day. So we're going to make sure that this makes its way over to your possession.
I don't know what to say, man. Thank you, Coach. That means a lot to me. This is a big part of my history and of DJ's history. The sport that we both love, the sport that we poured our all into. And one of the things I'm happy about is that he was able to at least play one last time before he went. I just gotta say thank you, Coach. That means a lot. That means more than you can know. So thank you. Just thank you to all of you who came out tonight, who participated. Thank you to Stonehill for having me and opening this discussion. 10 years ago, I was in the shoes of a lot of you students and walking around on campus. Never in a million years that I think I would be back here, leading a discussion for a school where I was, always being made to go to discussions and listen to other people talk. I never thought that that I would be able to come back and lead something like this. And so it, you know, it's full circle for me, and it means a lot to me. So, hey, I feel like we should make this a yearly thing, huh? But, you know, I just want to say thank you to all of you who put this together. And, you know, and if anybody else has any last questions for the last few minutes here, and then also, you know, my email is in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. If there's anything that you felt I left out, anything else that you want to know about, or even just to say hi, feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate it.
So if there are no further questions, we just want to say, obviously, thank you, Brandon. First of all, amazing your strength and passion to spread the word. And thank you to everyone who has attended tonight. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Brandon. Check out the DJ Dream Fund, and thank you again. And you know, hope to see you all soon.